Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Robin Hills, welcome to the show today. So happy to have you on, sir.
Matt, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, you have an accent. I don't think it's from Texas. I believe that you're from another country than I am from. I'm in the United States. Where are you based at?
I'm in the United Kingdom.
United Kingdom.
Early evening here in Greater Manchester. It's starting to get dark and starting to get very cold.
Oh, yes. It's so fun to have, a podcast where I get to talk to people all over, literally the world, all over the world, Japan, South America, Costa Rica, Australia. And I don't know if I've had a guest on from the UK before. I thought I maybe have, but it's definitely from Europe, but I don't know specifically from the UK. So I'm so happy to have you on. And we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence. We're going to be talking about mindfulness today. So I do want to read a little bit of your bio here. You are based in the UK in the Manchester area, and you're the director of a company called EI for Change. I'm assuming that stands for Emotional Intelligence for Change. Am I?
That's correct.
Wow,
yes.
Look at me. I'm just on the money today. You've been in the space, you've worked with companies, you've worked for companies, but really a lot of work around the psychology, emotional intelligence, mindfulness. That's kind of your specialty. Is that accurate to say?
It is. It's something that I've developed over the years, Matt, because I recognize that in order for companies to be successful, they need to look after their people because their people are the biggest asset that they've got.
Yes, totally. 100%. And for a special thank you that you've given us for all of our listeners and viewers today, as we will hear a little later in the program, you have a course that's normally around $100, but you're going to be giving that to our listeners for free to take on mindfulness. So we certainly appreciate that here at the show. Let's just jump right in if you're ready. Let's talk about what is your definition of emotional intelligence.
I think that's a great place to start because these two words, emotional and intelligence, they seem a little bit diametrically opposed, but they're not. Combining them together, it's really the way in which you combine your thinking with your feelings in order to build up good quality relationships and make authentic decisions. That's it. So anybody with a good level of intelligence should be able to actually look at the way in which they're feeling about situations and say to themselves, right, I'm getting some good information here. I'm getting some good data. How can I use this to my advantage? And how can I use this to the advantage of the other people that I'm interacting with? More often than not, people don't do that.
I was going to say that's not been my experience generally. Usually my emotions hijack whatever's happening in the moment, and then we're off to the races, right?
I think that's the case with a lot of people. So I think the thing with emotional intelligence, it's life's work. You just carry on learning and growing and developing and maturing around emotional intelligence as you get more experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was the key right there, that word experience. I know that I have become more mature in a way, I guess, if I want to give myself a little bit of credit in the emotional intelligence space. Doesn't mean that I'm always 100%, able to stop myself from being emotionally hijacked, but at least I have done work, right? I mean, it's like anything else. You're not going to get stronger if you don't lift weights. You're not going to get emotionally stronger if you don't do process, if you don't involve yourself in some type of educational process around emotional intelligence. It's not something, I've seen some people that seem like they were born with emotional intelligence, but I think for the vast majority of us, it really is something that we need to train in, right? And we need to learn about because it's not necessarily a natural. We didn't take that class in school. We didn't have, our parents didn't sit us down one day and say, this is how to be emotionally responsible, right? That didn't happen, right?
No, and as you say, some people have got it and some people haven't. I wish I had it. Like you, I'm still learning.
Right.
I say to people when I'm working with them, am I emotionally intelligent? Well, if I answer no, what am I doing in this space anyway? But if I answer yes, it's rather arrogant, self-conceited, and suggests that there's no room for development.
Right.
So the question's actually wrong. It's not, am I emotionally intelligent? Am I trying to be more emotionally
Right.
intelligent? Am I working on it? And the answer is yes, it's work in progress.
Yeah.
I've still got a lot to learn. I
Yeah.
still get emotionally hijacked from time to time. And hey, I work in this space. I should know the answer. And I know the theory, but sometimes
Yeah.
life takes over.
Yeah. I think life always shows us where we can improve, right? That there's always the
Yes.
ever evolving, well, no matter how good we are, there's always this next level, or there's always this another layer that we can, of awareness, right? That we can see
That's right.
in ourselves. So why does this matter to you? Why does this work matter to you? Because I've typically found from my own experience and from almost every guest we've ever had on the show that their life's work, especially when they're as passionate as you are about a subject, that their life's work comes from some life experience. It's like I've experienced something in my life that made me want to learn about this subject. In this case, it would be for you, emotional intelligence and mindfulness. So kind of why are you so passionate about that you've dedicated your life to this?
Well, I can't say that there's a single event that happened that
Uh-huh.
suddenly the light bulb went on and
Yes.
I thought, oh, now this is the area that I want to work within.
Right.
I think a lot of it was when I was a young man, I started my career in the pharmaceutical industry. I was a salesman.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I worked in the London teaching hospitals. This is a very, very difficult environment for people to work with. So I was going in and influencing senior clinicians and surgeons on the world stage. They
Mm-hmm.
were at the pinnacle of their career. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them would engage with me very, very well as a human being.
Right.
And they had all the time in the world for me, and we had good civil discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them would treat me like something that they picked up on the bottom of their shoe. And
Right.
I just couldn't work out why that was. It
Mm-hmm.
was fascinating. Often people would change jobs, move around within the hospitals and do
Mm-hmm.
things. Some had a reputation for not being particularly nice people,
Mm-hmm.
and some had a reputation for being absolutely wonderful people.
Mm-hmm.
And as they moved jobs, I found that it wasn't the job that caused them the problem, it was the person themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized then that it was down to the way in which the person was engaging with their environment. And then my other great passion is everybody is a unique individual. So how can we help people to recognize their gifts and to recognize what makes them special
Mm-hmm.
and to really help them to get the most out of their lives? So it just seemed a nice idea to combine all of these thoughts and passions together to work in the field of emotional intelligence.
Hmm. Yes.
So
Oh.
I've been working in this area now, having moved on from pharmaceuticals for about 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I could say I've been working in the area all my life, really, without the
Right.
label.
Right. Of course. Totally. You know, when you meet people from a specific country and you kind of generalize that everybody's from that country, it seems to me that people from the UK are nicer than the people from the United States. Is that because you seem very nice. You seem very nice, but you're in the space of emotional intelligence. So you should
I'm
be
in the space of emotional intelligence. Thank you for saying that. I seem nice. Obviously, that's what I aspire towards. But are UK people any nicer than Americans? I wouldn't say so.
okay.
We're just different. There are some wonderful Americans, yourself
Yes.
included, Matt,
Yes.
who are really, really nice, engaging and people.
Right.
And there are some people that I just don't want to engage with at all. And they could be from anywhere in the world. I
Yes,
think
totally.
what we've got to do is to keep very much an open mind and
Mhm.
embrace everybody. Try and work out, okay, that particular interaction didn't go well. What does it say about me? What does it say about them? And the truth and the reality lies somewhere in between the two.
Right, totally. Always right. And so what's the difference between emotional intelligence and yours, how you work, and mindfulness? Because I noticed that you've kind of made the distinction in the description and some of the stuff I'm reading. I'm seeing like this is emotional intelligence, but now you're talking about mindfulness. Is there a difference? And if so, what is the difference?
I wouldn't say there is a difference.
Okay.
It depends upon what people think of as mindfulness. And I think
Mhm.
what we've got to do is we've got to define what
Mhm.
mindfulness is,
Mhm.
because a lot of people seem to think that it's some kind of, well, it's a bit of woo-woo. Everybody sits in the corner and there's
Right.
joss sticks and they sit cross-legged and they go into a trance and go, Now, to a certain extent, some branches of mindfulness go in that direction,
Mhm.
and it works well for those people. But what mindfulness is, and this is not a brilliant definition, but it's a stab in the dark at getting the definition.
Mhm.
It's really being aware of what's going on in the present moment
Mhm.
in order that we can make, again, the best decisions that we can make within the present moment, being fully aware as to what's going on. Now, the present moment when I started that sentence has gone. It's now in the past.
Right.
And we're now moving very rapidly towards the future. Can't do anything about that. All I can do is to look at this particular present moment, which is 11 minutes past 4 in the United Kingdom on the 14th of December to
Mhm.
2022. That is the present moment. Well, it's gone. It's 1612 now.
Right.
So what can I do in this moment to build upon the past and to take myself forward to the future and carry people forward in that? So it's
Mhm.
also about awareness, which is a fundamental part of emotional intelligence. And there are going to be things going on in the environment that we're just not aware of, but it's having the openness to say, what is it that I'm missing? What should I be paying my attention to?
Mhm.
What should I be focusing on?
Yeah. And I was just getting ready to ask you what questions typically help us be more mindful. And I think you've just answered several of them right there. How do we do mindfulness, right? Because as typically the people that listen to this show and watch are driven individuals, right? They're business leaders, they're people that want to improve their lives, and so for most of us, it begins with, well, how do we do mindfulness versus, and I know mindfulness typically is a state of being, but how do we do mindfulness, right? So that we can actually engage in it actively. And so typically, how do you do mindfulness, you personally? What's your, I guess, practices or exercises to help you be more mindful?
Well, I'm often asked this question, and people tell me that they're too busy for mindfulness because a lot of people who practice mindfulness will say, "Oh, I spend 10 minutes a day meditating." And a lot of people can't, won't, or haven't got the time to take 10 minutes out of their day to practice meditation. That's their choice.
Mhm.
What I do is I practice meditation in small little snippets, not great big 10-minute chunks, either at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. So I snatch my moments of mindfulness and
Mhm.
I concentrate on my breath. Now, if I haven't got my breath, then there's no point in practicing mindfulness or even thinking about it.
Mhm.
So, where can I practice mindfulness? Well, I clean my teeth for 2 minutes every morning and every evening.
Mhm.
That is an opportunity where I can't do anything else. I'm cleaning my teeth. So I make the most of enjoying the taste of the toothpaste and I mindfully think about the paste as it foams and I enjoy the taste and I mindfully think about the toothbrush going across my teeth. So it really is concentrating on those various aspects of the present moment
Mhm.
rather than worrying about, oh, what am I going to be doing this morning? And what have I overlooked? What should I be doing? And, oh, I haven't done this or I haven't got that or I've got to do this. So it's actually just taking that time out to practice mindfulness. And then another opportunity that I often use, well, always use, is when I'm driving. I haven't got this ability to get all the traffic lights in front of me to go to green. So I stop at the traffic lights when it's on red, and there's nothing I can do to make the traffic light change any faster. That's an opportunity for me to stop the car, just start to concentrate on my breathing and to have that mindful moment. And then when the traffic lights change, off I go, and I feel more relaxed because of it, not despite it. Another example is we all queue at shops. We all queue when we're going on public transport. There's another opportunity for us to practice mindfulness rather than having a look at the phone and seeing what's on there and seeing what we're missing and getting a little burst of social media or whatever it is.
I found I've watched and I've observed in myself and that point. Well, one, let me back up. For translation, queue means to be in a line. So for those of you who just heard Robin say the word queue in the United States, we just call it being in a line. It's a queue in the UK, right? Being in a line. No, I love it. I love it. I love it. It's a UK thing. So when you said the queue, I knew what you meant, but I'm like, but in case you're listening, right? Being in a line. So if you're standing in a line at the grocery store, if you're standing in a line anywhere, being mindful in the line. And again, I would think returning to the breath, right? But I've noticed even in myself, I have anxiousness in those situations if I don't look at my phone, because it's like, I don't want to deal with the whatever's happening in the present moment. So I'm going to look at my phone as a way to detach from the reality of whatever's happening there, which is just nothingness to some degree, which is everything, right? Nothingness and everything all at the same time. And so I have noticed in myself and watched in others, sometimes you go places and it's like it's really weird when I go to a restaurant, which I do not. I will not, typically I won't even bring my phone in. It'll stay in the car. But when I go into a restaurant and you see like half or more of the people eating like with their phones and they're with other people, I'm like, they're sitting at a table with each other and they're looking at their phones. And I'm like, why? What I mean, are we not? I mean, are we just completely numb to the current reality? But I notice that when I'm in a line, when I'm somewhere, and I'm starting to feel any type of anxiety or any type of social awkward anxiety, I do pull out my phone and I do look at my phone as an escape mechanism. It's kind of like that little, it's almost like my little blanket, my little safety blanket or something that I, maybe had as a 3 or 4 year old child, right? It's kind of like, I want to feel safe. So instead of looking around and seeing if anybody's going to talk to me, I'm just going to look at my phone so I look like I'm important, right? Or something. Yeah.
Well, you asked about the connection between mindfulness and emotional intelligence, and the components in the inner world is awareness of self, and awareness of others. That's in the outer world, but mainly awareness of self. So it's just having that awareness. Why are you doing it? Is it a habit that you do without even thinking? Are you doing it as a habit mindlessly?
Right.
So if you're doing it because you think, oh, I need it because it's my comfort blanket, that's the first step to awareness. The other thing we've got to bear in mind when we're talking about emotional intelligence is the action and behavior components of the inner world, and that's emotional control. And what we've got here with people looking at their phones is the fact that they are not controlling themselves. They are not controlling their impulses to look at the phone, and they're not being very much in the present moment. So to a certain extent, they're being less emotionally intelligent than they could be. Now, I've got to be very careful here, Matt, because I can guarantee that there are loads of your listeners at the moment listening to us talking, looking at their mobile phone.
Of course, yes. And
so
that's where, yes.
Are they mindfully listening to us? And yes, I'm very good at multitasking. Yes, you think you are, but unfortunately, the brain doesn't operate that way. It operates with one task at a time, and it may be very good at switching. But as you're switching from one task to another, you've then got to pitch into the task that you're switching towards and forget about the task that you're switching from. And we can do it in nanoseconds. But if you're switching backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, you're not paying attention in the present moment. And so you miss vital bits of the two things that you're doing. And the two do not add up to a larger sum. The two add up to a lesser sum of the two added together.
Right. And, and that's basically from all of the management stuff from, I think, the 80s or early 90s that talked about multitasking and how you could get so much more done and right? And then it was like, once they actually started studying it, they saw diminishing returns, because I've heard it takes up to 45 minutes if you're concentrating on a project, and even like an email notification coming up on your computer, it takes you up to 45 minutes to get back to the level of focus or that you had prior to being distracted by that thing. And if you don't turn off your email notifications, you're getting email notifications every 2 or 3 minutes. And so you're never truly as focused as you could be if you were truly, a lot of times efficiency experts will say, shut off all your notifications on your devices and on your computer. And then you be proactive in how you respond to stuff versus having it drive the little the ding that drives the endorphins or whatever it kicks, serotonin, whatever it kicks, whatever chemicals, dopamine, whatever it kicks off in your head. Because you're actually becoming, and I think that's, to some degree, I know we're talking about mindfulness, but I think that's why so often we experience fatigue, mental fatigue, is because we're constantly overstimulated or constantly being distracted by things that aren't important, or even if they are important, right, it's still a distraction, right? There's no, from studying kind of high level and being around some very high level executives and very, or even not even executives, just people in general, they are like almost, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, they're almost super hyper regulated in what they're doing in any minute of the day, that they're only doing that thing, right? I mean, to the point of like, and I resisted this in the beginning, but I've noticed this in my own life. If I schedule things and I'm very scheduled, then that releases this hamster wheel in my head of all the tasks that I need to do. But if those tasks fall into a time that happens throughout the week or throughout the day, then I have a place to think about those things versus I'm trying to think about it constantly, or it's just sitting there in kind of in the memory and just idling and idling and idling, and it's never really getting processed because it doesn't have a place to process. And I've given you a lot of stuff to talk about there.
Well, let's take it back to emotional intelligence. It's all about awareness and self-awareness and self-regulation. It's having this understanding about yourself as to how you work and what works for you. Because what works for you, Matt, might not necessarily work for me. And I know a lot of people will work to to-do lists and they tick off to-do lists. And the first thing they tick off is write the to-do list, because that's right at the top of their to-do list. I don't do that because it doesn't work for me.
Right.
And I think the important thing is just to come up with a whole load of ideas and examples and say, well, you know yourself better than I do. You know yourself better than I will ever know you. So what is it that works for you? That's your task. Go and find out. Now, for me, I will write a list at the beginning of the week of things that need to happen by the end of the week. Now, I could do them all on a Monday morning if I set my mind to it, but I know my mind doesn't work that way. So by the end of the week, hopefully, everything will have been completed on that list. And other stuff will come in, other priorities, emergencies and urgencies. And my wife will come in and tell me that there's a cat and a squirrel in the garden. And my daughters will send me texts to tell me things that are going on in their lives that will need attending to at some point. And some of those I've got no choice over whether I deal with them at some point in the future. I have to deal with them then and there. So, I have to make my choices around it. So I build wiggle room into my day to allow for these emergencies from happening. Allow for these emergencies to happen so that I can manage them more appropriately. And we talked about anxieties at the beginning of our conversation. Yes, I get anxious like everybody else because stuff is piling up and I've got nowhere to go. It just keeps coming in and coming in and coming in. And then we have an expression in the United Kingdom, I think you have it in the US as well, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
Yeah. These straws are flying in the wind. Hopefully one doesn't land on my back. But it happens from time to time, and we hit the emotional hot button and off I go.
And so how do you, because you work with professional organizations, corporations, businesses, so how do you introduce this topic of emotional intelligence or mindfulness? And then how do you help process that or integrate that?
Well, I've learned over the years that organizations are very interested in the topic of emotional intelligence. If I go in there and start talking to them about emotional intelligence, they haven't got a clue as to what I'm talking about.
Right.
And they've got no clue or no indication as to how they can learn about it. So what I do is I go in and talk to them about improving performance. So it's leadership, it's teamwork, it's communication skills, it's conflict resolution, it's decision making. What are their biggest people challenges at the moment? Because whatever their biggest people challenges are in the present moment, it's underpinned by some element of emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of organizations, a lot of training companies that will go in and run leadership programs. And what they will do is they will bolt a module on at some point during the session on emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
No, what you've got to do is you've got to start off with the idea of emotional intelligence and build all the other components on top of that. It's the foundation, it's the bedrock of everything that we do, and then build on the leadership capabilities, the team working, the mindfulness element of it. Again, if I go into organizations and talk to them about mindfulness, most of the time what they will be thinking about are the caftan robes and the joss sticks.
Yeah.
So what we've got to do is to make it pragmatic, and we've got to make it appealing within the business environment using the right communication channels, the right communication tools, and speak their language.
Mm. And so typically, are you giving them like practices that they do throughout the day, like the breathing, or is it questions that you're giving them, or kind of typically what kind of roadmap are you giving them to help integrate this?
Well, it's a really interesting question, Matt. I was working earlier this month in London for a group of Malaysian financiers and politicians,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd flown to London to take an emotional intelligence course.
Mm-hmm.
And they came along with no real expectation as to what they were going to cover. And a lot of them said they were interested, but just didn't know what we were going to do. So what I do is that I talk them through the definition of emotional intelligence, and then I talk to them or get them to talk to me about the issues that they're facing at work. What is it that keeps them awake at night? What is it that really is causing them anxiety, causing them consternation? What is it that they would like to work on and improve? Then the next part of the emotional intelligence course is to actually build up the framework of emotional intelligence. We've talked about that today, about the awareness, about the emotional regulation, about empathizing with people, about using social skills and motivation and all of that. And I've said, well, you're all experienced leaders, so let's have a look at what your understanding of emotional intelligence is. Now, I could put a framework up on a slide and we could talk through it in 2 minutes and everybody would know, noddingly know it and agree with me. But the very fact that everybody is sitting there debating and discussing what the framework looks like and building it up themselves, we have some great interactions, some really good discussions. We see some really good behaviors. People learn a lot about themselves and a lot about their understanding just by sitting and listening to what other people are saying.
Mm-hmm.
So after they've been doing that for about 35, 45, 55 minutes, what I will do, help them to have a better understanding of what emotional intelligence is, building upon their discussion. So really look at all the things that they've got right, building more elements to make it even more correct. And the feedback that I get from that is absolutely phenomenal. They really, really enjoy that session because, and I do, because every time I run it, and I've run it scores of times, I always learn something completely new
Right.
from everybody's interaction. Then the next part of the training is very much a self-awareness piece. So we help people with understanding themselves better as a person, as leaders, helping them to understand their behaviors, what drives their behaviors. And in those sort of circumstances, I would use the psychometric, such as the Myers-Briggs type indicator or
Oh, right.
DISC.
So yeah, yep, some type of personality evaluation, just so you have and from my experience, typically that's just like a reference point. So we have a common, to your point, framework that we can start to communicate within, because they're all a little bit different, right? Myers-Briggs is different than DISC, and different than Strength Finder, that's different from, there's probably 100 or 1,000 different. Well, the Enneagram comes to mind. I have
10,000 plus if you actually have a look at how many
there are. All right. Okay, there we go. 10,000 plus. But you take any one of them that has some merit, right? And you certainly feel free to correct me if you feel differently, but take any of them, at least it gives you some talking points, because they do help us kind of categorize to some degree, this is how I'm interacting with the world currently.
I can't disagree with anything that you've said there at all, Matt. That is absolutely what I do with regards to emotional intelligence. So what we're doing is just presenting the same tools, but delivering them in a slightly different way. We're helping people to recognize what their gifts are through this level of self-awareness, through whatever tool we use. And anything with merit that opens up that discussion and opens up self-awareness is phenomenal. Well, you can do it with a pack of tarot cards if you've got the skills and capabilities to do it. You're just getting people to open up about themselves and to explore different ideas and look at different perspectives and really get some knowledge about themselves that they didn't have. Now, obviously, a more robust scientific measure is going to have more credence, but use whatever tools come to mind in order to get people to open up and embrace the concept that their view of the world is right for them, but it's inherently wrong because other people have different views of the world that are as right for them as they are for anybody else.
Right. Yeah. And I was just writing down and I'm not that familiar with it, but I hear it talked about a lot. And it seems like it has some pretty good basis for interaction and communications, is the Enneagram. I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
But the Enneagram test, I've had several friends who've taken that, and that's really, I've heard positive feedback that's helped them in their relationship with their spouse, with their employees, because they realize that, I've got a friend, and I think he is a self-described 8, I think 8 or 8, and an 8, is usually fairly opinionated and headstrong. And from my understanding of what he's telling me, I have not studied. So if you're an Enneagram expert out there, know that I'm butchering this, and I'm good with butchering it, because I'm telling you, the disclosure is I haven't studied it. I need to. I'm writing it down. But I have lots of fun with him because I do understand he's described what basically he is. And I watched him evolve his emotional intelligence because he was studying it, and he realized why his marriage had fallen apart, because he was studying what she was, post, after the trauma and the, all of the stuff. He was actually kind of game filming it to some degree and saying, okay, why did this go wrong? Because I don't want to have this happen to me again in my life. And I thought it was really, I really respected the fact that he took the time to actually look at himself and say, this is how I am, and this is how my ex-wife was, but this is how my children are, and this is how my coworkers are. And I could see him getting emotionally more intelligent. I really could, over a course of maybe 2 or 3 months. It happened actually, I think, fairly quickly, because once he was more introspective and becoming more aware of how he was showing up, then he knew also there's always a positive side to those things, and then also challenges that you will have in communication. For instance, in the Enneagram 8, the positive side is he is confident, and he can make decisions quickly, and he is a great leader, a business leader, and he can be a great family leader. But the flip side of that is usually short-sighted and listening to others' opinions and allowing new thought, kind of a knower mentality versus a learner mentality. And so, so have you used that Enneagram very much, or there's some of these others that you kind of lean on more heavily?
No, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, Matt. I'm not qualified in the Enneagram, but thank you for sharing that brilliant story. That really is, well, that epitomizes everything that we're talking about with regards to the use of assessments within the world of emotional intelligence. I'm a member of the British Association for Psychological Type, and I often present workshops at their conferences and engage with people who are much better at psychological type than I am. And many of the practitioners, they use the Enneagram and swear by it positively, rather than swear at it. No, they swear by it. And it complements the work that they do with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the Jungian type assessments that they use. Now, it's just an area that I've not explored, but at some point in the future, because I hear such good things about the Enneagram, I might be missing something.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of that's what it was, the awareness I was having as well. It's like I keep circling it and writing and doing stuff, because I used to actually train the disc profile, and I've taken Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinder 2.0 and some of these others, and it's always really helpful, especially I find in the dynamics when you're doing it in a team setting, whether it's professionally or personally. I think it helps you. It's one thing to kind of read it and have theory. It's another to like be able to say, oh, like my friend who's an 8, I can say, oh, that's an 8, and that he has 8 tendencies, or communication. I almost look at it as communication styles. I don't want to put him in a box and say he's an 8. I want to say his communication style leans towards that being an 8, right? That communication, or that way of processing information.
Yes, and I think the great thing about any assessment, whether it's the Enneagram, whether it's DISC, whether it's social styles, whether it's strength finders, whether it's Jungian type, it opens up conversations around self-awareness. It opens up awareness of other people's differences, be they preferences or styles or whatever. And how do I work with somebody? If I'm an 8, how do I work with somebody who's a 7? How do I work with somebody and adapt my behavior to somebody who's a 6? And I think that is the challenge. Now, I did mention that there are 10,000 plus assessments out there. That was a number that was given to me about 10 years ago, so it's probably doubled by. But you know what I am fully aware of when I'm working with organizations is, let's not bring in a shiny new one that might be the latest raving psychometric that everybody's talking about, and oh, isn't this wonderful, we've got to use this. What have you got in your kit bag? Look, oh yeah, we did Myers-Briggs, we did that 5 years ago, well, let's move on from it. No, let's get Myers-Briggs out of your kit bag and get it used and applied properly. Let's look at it at a deeper level. Let's really explore it. Let's get it embedded in, so much so that it becomes a fundamental part of the way in which this organization operates. So if you've been using Myers-Briggs, stick with it. And you know, I've been studying that tool for 15 odd years, and there's stuff that I still am learning about it. DISC, I've been working with that for 12 years. There's stuff about DISC that I'm still learning today. So you know, you can't just do it. Oh, I'm you know, an ENFP, which is my type. That's what I am. So you know, I've got that. Now let's move on. Let's see what number I am on the Enneagram. Let's see what I am on DISC. No, let's look at the way in which you're utilizing this information. What are your strengths? Are you really fully utilizing those strengths to the full extent? Or are those strengths now flipping over, becoming a weakness because of your circumstances, your environment? What's changed since you took it? How are you expressing yourself? I've mentioned that I'm an ENFP. Well, what does that mean? For anybody who's a practitioner, they might have a vague understanding. Unless they themselves are an ENFP, they're not going to really know what it is, what it means. Let's be honest about this. So when I started working with type, I was in my 40s. So a 40-year-old ENFP is going to be completely different from a 50-year-old ENFP.
Right.
And a 50-year-old ENFP is going to be completely different from a 60-year-old ENFP. So, you know, let's explore those differences. And the ENFP that I was when I was working in the pharmaceutical industry is a completely different ENFP from what I am doing now, working in the field of emotional intelligence. So let's explore that. So, you know, these are very, very, very powerful tools. And I think a lot of times organizations just use them as party pieces.
Yeah.
You know.
And yeah, and I appreciate the reminder, because it's been a long time since I've done any work around any of those type systems, or I've done different training. I've, you know, become trainers in some of this stuff, but it's been a long time since I used that as a way for engagement, because it, you know, on its surface, it can sound like, oh, this is, you know, or at least it could be perceived that, oh, this is like narcissistic. All you want to do is focus on you, and all you want to do is learn about, and that is not the case at all. Is from my experiences, is the more we learn about ourselves, the less we judge others, and the more accepting we are of others, and the more we are healthier emotionally, more mindful, have higher emotional intelligence, because we understand more of our strengths, and you could say weaknesses or challenges or things that we could improve on. So we actually have that awareness, we have that mindfulness to start engaging with others, because then we start to realize, well, they have the same thing. They have their strengths, but they also have their challenges. And it almost, I think it, as we dive deeper into ourselves, we naturally start to have more compassion for others, because we see our own shortcomings. And so instead of judging them as harshly, we say, oh, this is part of this type of personality, or the personality that I show up as. This is kind of part of the deal. I can't just throw away, you know, you have to take the positives and the perceived negatives, because they have their strengths and they have opportunities for learning, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting. If we look at emotional intelligence, let me go back to Jungian type theory.
Which I'm not familiar with. So if you don't mind just giving me a little bit of it. I'm not familiar with the Young, are you saying Jungian type theory?
Jungian, Carl Jung, who developed the a foundation for the Myers-Briggs type indicator.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So what we do when we're looking at Jungian theory is we're looking at preferences, and the preferences are the way in which people get their energy. Do they get it through extroversion, or do they get it through introversion? The way in which people will take in information, do they get it through sensing? Do they get it through intuition? The way in which people process information, do they do it through thinking, or do they do it through feeling? And then the Myers and the Briggs elements was built on in terms of the way in which people engage with the world. Do they do it through judging, and do they do it through perception? So people will have a preference on those scales for one or the other. And as we get older, we become more familiar with our own preference, more comfortable with that preference, and start exploring other preferences.
Right.
So we become a lot more adaptable as we get older, as we mature, and as we grow in terms of the way in which we engage with the world, and in terms of emotional intelligence. Now, if we look at emotional intelligence theory, it suggests that we become more emotionally intelligent as we get older. So the two are probably very congruent. And as we get older, we become more mature. So if we look to our elders, they're the ones with wisdom. Where's that wisdom come from? They weren't born with it. But a senior person within our community will have that wisdom that's grown with them. And they've learned the hard way. So you're going to get far more wiseness from a 70-year-old who has retained their mental capacity, as compared with a 30-year-old.
Well, yeah, I will just leave that one right there. I will say, though, that I have recently engaged in a friendship with a gentleman that's about 30, what is he, 32 years older than I am, my senior. And I have gained a lot of value. We go to lunch about every other week, and he and I are enjoying that experience. It's very informal. It was just, he was an acquaintance, and now I would call him a friend, but I get so much out of it. But I've also noticed, and I've asked him specifically, because I was like, I don't want this to be one-sided where we come to lunch but he is getting so much out of it because he is getting to impart wisdom, and he's very wise when he does it. He doesn't tell me what to do. He just gives me stories from his life, right? His from the time where he hit his head like I'm hitting my head in that moment, right? But I have found that it's been very he has expressed appreciation for the fact that he gets to talk about stuff that's a little bit deeper than, whatever, you do at the supermarket or the grocery or wherever you go. Because in the beginning, I was very concerned about that because I knew I was getting a ton of value. What value was he? But he's getting to impart wisdom, right? That he's paid for his whole life, right? He has this vault of wisdom that he's paid for with emotional suffering to some degree through his life and experiences and pain and all this stuff. And so he's got this wealth of emotional intelligence that I'm able to then glean and kind of bridge this gap between where I'm at and the 30 years in front of me. And it's been extremely, I would say for me, healing, because more often than not, I find myself either in tears of grace or tears of something, a wound being healed by just being in relationship with this man that's my senior. And so it's been, and this is a recent thing, and it's been very profound. And even though it's very simple, it's just lunch, right? It's not like we have some major topic that we're going to sit down and we're going to figure out and we're going to do this and this and this. It's like, no, we're just chit chatting about the day and about our lives. But man, he just drops these wisdom bombs, one right after the other. And he's not doing it he's just telling me about his life, right? It's not like he's like, I'm going to sit here and impart on Matt the following 10 items, right? Or I'm going to teach Matt today about this. It's not that. It's just he's sitting there and like, he'll just tell me a story. And I'm like, man, that is so wise, right? So anyway, that's been my experience.
Well, do you know what he's getting out of that relationship, Matt? You're sitting there struggling. You're actually validating him.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what he's getting. He's enjoying that interaction as much as you are, so he's gleaning as much from it. There's me making some assumptions based upon what you've told me.
No, yeah, I think that's accurate, 100% accurate.
But that's how I would interpret the situation. That's how I would feel in those circumstances.
Yeah. So I love it. So cool. So just as takeaways, because I always, for me, I take notes during every podcast I do, but for takeaways for me, and I think for the listeners, one would be just a deeper dive into mindfulness is one, just being aware of and I'm going to try to summarize and then feel free to add on, but kind of being aware that you're, I guess, not present, and then bringing presence by just being aware and witnessing what you're doing. To your point, brushing your teeth, sitting at a stoplight. It was a great reminder when you said breathing, which is just literally, sometimes I remember, I can be most present when I just count my breath, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I mean, it's like, because then I'm like actually in my body, I'm actually experiencing to breathe instead of not breathing. And then I really like this thought that you've interjected here in today, which is these personality tests that are readily available. They're super accessible today to just kind of better understand our own self. So we do have that higher emotional intelligence. And then if we can be in relationship with someone who has more emotional intelligence or wisdom and just be around them, that's going to also, I believe, raise our emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And I would also say to yourself and to any of the listeners out there, if you are experienced in a personality assessment, don't continually look for the
new shiny
one.
Right.
Just go back to what you've learned and just open it up and explore it. The very fact that you're familiar with it doesn't mean to say that the rest of the world is so familiar with it. Just embrace it and learn it at a deep level. There's loads and loads and loads of information that you can use with it. So recoup your investment and continually recoup it. recoup it.
Yes, yes. Well, before we wrap up here today, is there any other wisdom that you would like to impart to anybody listening, but just in general? If I've been asking this question lately, and I'm always pleasantly surprised at the answer. If there's 8 billion of us that have this, have bodies and have bones and are walking the face of the earth or sitting on the face of the earth. So there's 8 million of us, or 8 billion of us now. If you had one message, if you had, 2 or 3 minutes and you could get one message to all 8 billion of us at one time, what would that message be?
What is it that makes you special? What is it that makes you unique? Is it that makes you stand out from all the other 8 billion people out there? Because there is something. You've just got to go and find it.
I love it. I love it. And I'm always surprised, and I'm always pleasantly surprised. Robin, I really appreciate you coming on today. I really appreciate you, how amazing it is that we live in a time where you and I are talking literally from different sides of the world over an ocean that would have used to take months for us to even be in the same room at the same time. And now we're doing it in nanoseconds and able to have these amazing connections. So I just really appreciate your time today and your wisdom and the work you're doing, because it makes the world a better place. So I'm going to say for the 8 billion of us out here, the other 7.99, whatever it is, billion of us, thank you, Robin, for doing the work you're doing. And thank you for loving on us. And thank you for being with us and being present with us. And thank you for being a great reminder of how important it is to be present. So I'm just going to say thank you from the rest of the world.
And can I reciprocate that thanks to you, Matt?
Well, of course, yes. I appreciate that as well. Once you come on the show, I always say you're a friend of the show. So if there's something that's on your heart, on your mind, and you think, that it would be something you'd like to visit about more, we'd love to have you come back and visit with our community and know that you have at least one, if not many, friends in the United States. If you ever come over, be happy to go to lunch and have a visit.
That would be brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Matt. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, have a great day.
You too.
Bye. Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE Vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.